no more fun classes to record than reproductive system. Makes me more self-conscious than usual, but. So this unit that we're going into, that's gonna have an exam that's very different than the others. Wrong class. This is a place where I use instructor privilege about what to teach. And I teach more on reproductive system and these topics than your average A&P2 class, because I think it's really important. And the stuff that I'm teaching in this section, it will be helpful to you in your career, but it is mostly helpful to you in your life. So this is not always like easy to teach or easy to talk about, but I feel like it is important, and it's really important to me to do this well. So in this section, we've got slides, and I will let you know each day, like, how do I test this stuff? But it's pretty different than other units. And it's short, but all of this, I want it to be helpful to your life. There'll be some helpful to your career, but mostly for your life. And something that I do in this section is I put these index cards. And most other days, I'll try to have them here on your seat before you come in. And what these are for is if you have a question and you're not brave to ask it out loud in the class, leave it on an index card, and you just leave these on your desk when you leave. And I come around and pick them up. And I look at what the questions are, and then I get that into the lecture where it's going to come up. If you're brave to ask a question during class, just go ahead and ask it. Like I have now pretty seasoned, and I've had like a lot of questions during class. And
So I have a question about.
Yeah.
Have you talked to your children about this problem?
About their scrotum?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story about that later. I'll tell you a story about that first. Related. Okay, so I grew up in this area. I went to health class in this area, and family life in this area. And I know what it's like around here, and it's really not good. And when I was cleaning out my oldest son's backpack stuff from like 2 years ago, like he keeps all the papers in the backpack all the time, I found the papers that they used to teach that, and I found the diagrams that they use, and I thought, Lord, no wonder nobody knows this stuff, because it's still probably the same as when I had that. So most of what I learned about reproductive system, I taught myself when I was pregnant, because I started reading pregnancy books and pregnancy like blog message board stuff. And that's actually how I learned the most about reproductive system, was when I was pregnant. Which that's an okay time, but it's better to learn about it before. So and we go back and forth. Just try I'm recording this right now, unlisted. We go back and forth with like, I don't want to be that pushy mom, like, boys, let's sit down and talk about this stuff. But I'm good at it. And if your parent was able to talk to you about that stuff and not have it be weird, I'd love to get tips from you later about how they make it not weird. But it's much easier with you all. Yeah, it's much easier with you all. But if you have a question and you're brave to go ahead and ask it, go ahead and ask it. I'm not as inflexible with time in this unit. So, okay, so here's your quiz questions for the day. And there's one quiz for next Friday that I don't have written yet. If you go to take it in next week and it's not written, I'm probably just not going to make one. So here's quiz of the day. And we're gonna like start with anatomy today. And I know that we went through anatomy some in the lab yesterday, but today, what I do with anatomy in here is like, okay, this is what it's called, this is what it's for. So in the lecture, we go more into the function. And for male external anatomy, there is not that much with the external anatomy that's related to function. But one important thing to know is what circumcision actually does. Which is a medical procedure to remove this skin covering over the head of the penis, and the covering is called prepuce or foreskin. If males are going to be circumcised, it's easiest to do this when they are very young. It is possible to do it as an adult. But if you go into nursing, you might get to see this. You want to have somebody with good steady hands to do this on males of any age. There are some minor contributions to health in populations, in sexual health in male populations between circumcised and uncircumcised, but it is not that big of a difference. So I feel like in your all's generation, there will probably be less circumcision over time. Yeah. So what we're going to look at next is male internal anatomy. And for both males and females, I'm going to start where the gametes are produced, because those are the most important parts in a reproductive sense. And these diagrams from OpenStax, we use them a little bit on lab exam, but they actually going to get used in the lecture exam. So I'll mention later like how I use them in lecture exam, but you want to spend a good amount of time in familiarity with these diagrams. So the most important part of male reproductive system from existential standpoint is the testis. So if there's one, it's testis with an I, and if it's two, it's testes. And they create sperm. So that is the major thing to know about testes. And then the rest of the male reproductive anatomy has to do with delivery of sperm. Testes are making them, the rest is for delivery. So I'm going to start here and move through male reproductive system from testis to glans penis, which is the head of the penis. So that's the direction that we're moving. So testis builds sperm, and something important to know about sperm is their genetic content. I try not to write as much in this section. So in your whole body, if you're male, all the body cells of a male, except sperm, basically, are going to have 2 copies of every chromosome, and those we call diploid cells. Does that ring a bell from high school? Diploid, haploid. And for humans, the diploid number of chromosomes is 46. So you would have 2 versions of each type of chromosome, and you get half from each parent. So when you got half of your chromosomes from your male parent, they were brought to you in sperm, which have 23 chromosomes, and that we call that situation haploid, like haploid. So in a male reproductive system, there are some particular cells that are able to do meiosis, and they're in the testis. And they are able to start with diploid cells called spermatogonium and undergo meiosis and have those chromosome numbers until you produce sperm, which have haploid chromosome numbers. And the details of that are more of like a Gen Bio 1 type of topic, but it's very important that the sperm be haploid and that they have 23 chromosomes each. Just going to write that number 23 in there. And that process is called spermiogenesis. sperm building, and it happens in the testis. Or testes if you have two. You can just have one and this still works. So what we're looking at here is looking inside the scrotum. So the covering around is scrotum. You have that in the lab yesterday. And then so inside the scrotum, there is a testis, hopefully one on each side. And inside the testis is this network of tubes called seminiferous tubules. And the semen part comes from the same word as semen. So seminiferous tubules are basically most of what a testis is. And they're kind of twisty. And each individual one of these on the inside, it can be forming sperm, and the sperm kind of move in a certain direction here. So let's draw that on. So we've got sperm being produced in seminiferous tubules, and they basically start, what would this be? Inferior proximal to the body. So they kind of start here. It's kind of like a little maze when you're waiting at a restaurant. And then we kind of take a path up into here. And then eventually they leave the testis and they'll exit the body. So that's their path. And there's a section of a testis that's kind of superior to the rest up on the top here, and it curves around like this arc shape. And this is called epididymis. So this section up here is the epididymis. And by the time the sperm make it up to the level of the epididymis, they are going to finish maturing. And they hopefully by that point will become functional. So this is kind of like, if we think about maturation of sperm as like people going through school, so you like pre-K, elementary, middle school, high school, oh, then you're ready to work, right? Come on, yeah. And then can go out and do the job that they're supposed to do. So when sperm are at the epididymis, they finish maturing, and then they will kind of stay there in the epididymis until they reach, let's say, this point. And after that point, they are going to move by muscle contraction. They can sort of swim around in epididymis, but to really exit the testis, it's going to involve muscle contractions to help them move. In the lab on the microscopes, did you guys look at microscope slides yesterday? Okay. Those tend to be one of the trickier things on the lab exam. Testis kind of looks like a bunch of circles all together. And they sort of have this pattern. These are the seminiferous tubules. And to me, they look like a bunch of peppermints laid down in a pattern, like kind of like circles with starbursts in between. They kind of have a peppermint looking appearance on a slide. That's testis. So for sperm, to form properly and mature into the best functional version that they can be, the perfect temperature for that is 93, not 98. That's one of the most, I don't know, that's just, I found that cool. Literally cool, cooler than the rest of the body. So, male anatomy will maintain testis at that temperature by having temperature sensors in the testis and then using muscle contraction to either pull the testes up close to the torso, not point my hands, or let them be further from the torso, from the body wall, and get cooler. So, sort of raising up would be keeping them warmer. Lowering down would be cooler. And there are muscles underneath the scrotum that control this called cremaster and dartos muscles. Those are not on your anatomy list, but that's just what they're called. And so when males are generally feeling cold, or they're going to have retracted testes, trying to keep the sperm warm. And by now, Seinfeld is a really old show, but there was an episode that totally related to this. And I need to get a little clip of it and make the video of the day, but I haven't done that yet. But they need to have a cooler temperature to form proper sperm. So this is the appearance of a good, healthy, properly formed sperm, and it's got 3 regions. You learn this in health, high school, middle school.
Elementary situation.
Did you? I mean, I feel like this is very dependent on where'd you go to school.
My school didn't have one.
Didn't have one at all.
The parents petitioned not to.
Yeah, well. I mean, I get how it's kind of scary, but I think I would be good at that, but I'm not gonna get outside my lane. Mm-hmm.
So that is that's what it's supposed to look like. And people go to the doctor, like, they can have kids. Is it because it don't look like that, or is it just because?
There's all different reasons for that. So there's a slide coming up. I'm gonna kind of talk about that and tell you all a story. One of my most vivid memories of my life that's related to that. So now you're like, jeez. So there's three sections. So there's the head section, and that's where you've got 23 chromosomes that's carrying the DNA. And then you've got this mid piece section, which is basically to make ATP. So there's a lot of mitochondria in there to form ATP so that the sperm can swim. And then the tail is for doing a wave motion to swim. So it's not like bacterial tail where they rotate like this. Can't do it. It's not like an outboard motor type of thing. It's like a fish tail. It waves and it propels the sperm. So if sperm are not formed properly in any of these regions, they will be less effective for fertilization. And you can find that out during a sperm analysis, which we'll get to in a minute. So there is, if you later want to go and watch this video, it's a guy talking about sperm analysis, and you need to put the captions on. He's got a really heavy accent, but it's pretty cool. And what, I'll tell you the story now. So when we were in Arkansas, we were really involved in that college that Han taught in, like basically as much involved as we are here, except I didn't work there. So we would do things all the time, and we would bring our kids over there, and everybody knew us at the college. And our younger 2 boys are really close in age, and that was on purpose. I'll tell you more about that like another day. It relates to lecture, but we knew we want to have 3 kids, and like, I knew I also want to go back to work, like, we should just go ahead and have the 3rd one right now, I'm like. And those were some hectic years, but they're really close together, so. All the boys were born by C-section, and when you're gonna have a C-section, you have to go to a pre-op appointment. And like, they do, I don't remember what they do. That's not the part I remember, but I remember going to the hospital in the small town in Arkansas. I'm sitting there, my big pregnant self. And Han went with me, and we're sitting there waiting for my pre-op appointment. And then we see Ray coming in, and Ray is the volleyball coach at this school, and this is far away, so I know you don't know him. And Ray's coming in with a sperm sample cup, and he sees us, and we see him, and then it gets really awkward because he knows that like we're blessed with kids, and here's another one right after the other one, and we know that Ray and his wife cannot conceive. And that was just like one of the most unfair moments that I've ever experienced, of like just knowing like, oh, life is not fair, because like back then Han was way bigger, way less healthy. I was some bigger, obviously like not that healthy, but Ray and Jen, his wife, are like the healthiest, youngest, fittest. It was so unfair. And he's walking in with this sample, and we're sitting there with son number 3. It's just so unfair. And I'm never going to forget that. And actually that type of thing, and hearing other people's stories about not being able to have kids, got me interested in this. So there's a video of a semenologist. That's a real job. You have to become a doctor first, then you can become a semenologist. Fun video. But these are kind of the normal normal measurements, I guess you could say, for normal sperm. You can write them first, and I'll say some about it. So to form sperm, start to finish, it takes about 2 months. And when they get older, when do men stop making sperm? You ever think about this? A long time. Like maybe you've got some friends that you knew growing up, and you're like, you say something about their papa, and they're like, that's my dad. Did you ever have a friend like that? I did. So men can create sperm basically their whole life. It takes about 2 months start to finish. Pretty quick. Who says that? There's less. And an individual man might. But it's not 50 or 60, it's older than that. So they would kind of make less, but they can make sperm their whole life. A normal ejaculation, so one event should have about 200 million. That is a lot. So that's like more than I would have thought. But the normal volume of ejaculation is about 2 milliliters, and this is less than everybody thinks. So I feel like that's not accurate. Like in I'm saying like in movies and stuff. I'm not talking about that kind of movies, but just movies, or like how media portrays ejaculation. 2 milliliters is about like 2 sections of my pinky. That's the normal volume. And once sperm are in the female reproductive tract, they can survive up to 6 days, and that's pretty important. We're going to talk about that more in later lectures. So they can live there for up to 6 days. The first 2 days, they have the best function. On a surface, like on a hard surface, they are not going to survive that long. And if they're out exposed to the air on the surface, they are going to degrade much faster than that. But in female reproductive tract, it's about 6 days. They need to have a normal anatomy, which we would get that from the previous page. So they need to have basically this anatomy. And they need to have also a certain, like a certain viscosity. So you have sperm and then you have the fluids that they're suspended in. And there's a correct and incorrect thickness to that as well. So Deja asked about like stuff that can go wrong with sperm. So I'm going to describe to you 3 friends that Han has. And people like tend to confide in him about stuff, and especially guys with infertility. It's more common than you would think. So here's what their problems were. Number 1, not enough. Number 2, this sounds weird, but they only turned left. They couldn't swim. They just swim in a circle. They can't actually go in a straight line or turn to the right. They would swim in a circle. And then number 3, I think was maybe formed wrongly. And those are just the friends that had the male having the problem. Another friend thought they would have a problem because they had some kind of cancer and they had to have a testicle removed. And so they thought, oh no, this is going to cause me problems. That did not cause them problems because their sperm was okay. So those were the 3 friends that had an issue. And there can be a lot of things that go wrong with sperm, but you don't really know until you try to get pregnant, and then you can have your sperm checked by a semenologist. Ray and his wife just this year adopted a child. Expensive.
So Dr.
Mm-hmm.
If men continuously use sperm, what's the good age, like, dang, you know, maybe you shouldn't have this child?
That tends to be like the age at which you shouldn't have a child. It tends to be different in different cultures and be more of a cultural thing than a biological thing. So there is some evidence that older dads tend to have, in a population, their kids have more rates of autism, but that's kind of a weak, it's not a strong association, it's a weak association. And then you tend to, like, older parents, the issue tends to be, will I be there when the child is grown up? Or how long am I going to live? Am I going to live to see them grow up? How long will they have to live without the parent? And then there's, financial implications too, but biologically, it's not. If the sperm can fertilize, it was probably good enough. Yeah.
I know geriatric pregnancies, like over 35. I don't know what they call it, geriatric pregnancy. That's-
They do.
And,
Yeah.
isn't that like, someone said the chances of the child having Down syndrome increased?
That's in the mom.
In the mother?
Yeah.
I thought it was the.
Yeah. So what Katie's mentioning is that women who are pregnant after 35 are considered geriatric pregnancy and high risk
They don't use that.
because the mom's age is much more relevant to the health of the fetus than the dad's age. And that's just one of those things that's unfair, but biologically true. So when we get to the female anatomy, I'll mention some more things about that. Yeah, I didn't have a pregnancy in the geriatric age range, but I'm not that old. So we got sperm form in the testis, they mature in the epididymis, and then they are able to move through vas deferens, which is really long. Something that kind of never really thought about how long the vas deferens was, but when I looked at it, I'm like, well, that's longer than I would think, because it goes out of the testis. And there are two, so they actually go outside, outer edge of the penis, and they go up over the pubic bone, which seems like a terrible idea. But that's how it is. Seems very crushable, doesn't it? Like, anyway, up over the pubic bone, back and around the bladder, long trip. Come back around the back of the bladder, and then there are going to be some contributions from 3 glands, these accessory glands. So this structure can be called vas deferens, or it can be called ductus deferens, and I want you to know both words. They are the same thing. Vas deferens, ductus deferens, and there's 2 of them, and they're long, and they go up and around the bladder, and they come around the back. And at that point, the sperm are going to be joined by some fluids. So you've got sperm coming from here, fluids from these accessory glands, and the combo of all that is what semen is. So semen has sperm, but it's not just sperm, it's sperm plus fluids. So these, I had heard of prostate. I had not heard of these other 2 glands before. And this is the looking from a male's back. So we've got bladder. Here's vas deferens or ductus deferens. And the 2 of them are going to come join at the back of the bladder. And they pass by these first 2 glands called seminal vesicles. And that kind of looks like I don't know, like a butterfly or something on the back of the bladder. Seminal vesicles. And the fluid that they make is the most volume. So they're pumping in quite a lot of fluid to combine with the sperm. And the important thing that it has is fructose. What is fructose? It's a sugar. Yeah, it's a disaccharide. And the fructose, actually it's a monosaccharide. The fructose is fuel for the sperm. So sperm are pretty compact, and they've got this long journey, and it's going to need a lot of ATP to wave that tail and move them. So some of their energy they're getting from fructose in the semen, and that comes from the seminal vesicle. And then the sperm plus that fluid will travel through the prostate, and the prostate, what it's really for is reproductive fluid. Everybody's heard of prostate. It's somewhere down there, it's somewhere around the bladder. What the prostate is for is to contribute more fluids, a pH balancer, so the pH of semen is basic. And it's important that it be basic so that it can neutralize vaginal acidity. So it's normal for semen to be basic. It's normal for the vagina to be acidic. And so the sperm are going to bring with them a pH balancer to kind of neutralize vaginal pH so that they can move. And then the prostate also contributes coagulants. What is that? A what?
Clumping.
Clumping, yeah. So sperm, once they're ejaculated into the female, they will kind of form a more clumpy fluid so that it doesn't immediately fall out. That makes sense. So it's helpful for the sperm to stay in long enough to fertilize. So these coagulants in the prostate contribute that ability. And then there are these 2 really small glands called bulbourethral. They're next to the urethra. They're bulb shaped. There's 2 of them. And they also contribute fluid, and their fluid is basically what pre-ejaculate is. So there's a fluid that during sexual arousal in males will be produced, and it doesn't have much sperm in it. It comes from these two, but they can have a little bit of sperm come from it. So pre-ejaculate is gonna have, less than 0.1% the amount of sperm as actual ejaculate, but there's some. And I bet you learned about that in your health. But they talk about that in a little bit different way. So of those three glands, the prostate is the one that people hear about the most because it tends to cause a problem with urination later. And I remember I talked about that quite a bit in the urinary system slides. So as men age, the prostate tends to enlarge, and this is called benign because it's not that bad. Prostatic hyperplasia, so it grows bigger. And if prostate grows bigger, it kind of squeezes on the bladder and it makes it hard to empty the bladder. So as men get older, it's harder to empty the bladder, and that's more of a urinary problem than a reproductive problem. So now we're looking back at the side view. So here's the testis, epididymis, vas deferens, and it looped up and around. And this is prostate. Here come the sperm through the prostate. Here's the entrance of the bulbourethral gland fluid. And then it's in the penis. So we've gotten to this point. Want to back up one thing. Well, on this slide, let's put it on this slide. So about right here. So we have the semen pathway and the urine pathway. Basically merge and join together in the middle of the prostate. And from that point onward, it's all the same tube, it's the urethra. So when those merge, we call that urethra. And the male urethra can be carrying urine sometimes and can be carrying semen sometimes. And that's a big difference from how female anatomy works. I wanted to put that before we go to this picture. Okay, so here we've got, one of these is urine, one of these is semen. They're now joined together and coming through the urethra. And all of these structures in the penis are basically optimized for sperm delivery into the female reproductive tract. They are not needed for urination, really. It makes urination convenient. That's one good thing about having boys. Oh, there's no rest stop, just go over there. Be in the woods, that's convenient. Penis is not needed for urination, it's needed for sperm delivery. And for effective sperm delivery, getting rigidity is helpful for that. So the bulk of the penis is made up of these chambers called corpus spongiosum and corpus cavernosum. And when I first learned this, I had trouble not getting them backward. Any of you yesterday have a way that you don't get them backward? Like, how do you know which one is which? I'll tell you how I try to remember it. So see how in cavernosum, there's two of those and they're like more of the space. So I imagine that as like, oh, it's cavernous, it's bigger together. That's corpus cavernosum. Corpus spongiosum is around the urethra. So got those in cross-section and then in side view. We'll have to stop there. It seems like we're really behind, but Friday we'll talk about female reproductive system and conception. Those go together pretty well, so. We'll see you Friday. I also will be recording Friday, but if you're around, come to class. It's better.